We're filming today for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive in New York City, and I am really pleased to have Billy Bauer as my guest, who's been playing guitar for many years and braved some inclement weather to be with us this morning. So I really appreciate it.
It's a cool day.
It's a cool guy and a cool day. Well, I would like to ask you first about your guitar institute that you're working on. That your guitar
School.
business, your school. Yes.
Well, you know, it isn't a big school, but what I do, well, I mean, if I had to earn a living, I couldn't do it. But being the way I am, like at this part of my life, I like to see people and how they want to do things. You know, these fellas some of them throw away everything. They think they're going to be big stars or something, and they make their own record dates, you know, they put everything they got into this. So I try to tell them, you know, go ahead. You know, it's your turn to throw the dice. And then they say, well, how did you do? I said, don't do what I did. Like, you know, you got your own life, and I generally, when they get doing, they want a copy, you know, like I try to tell them, listen to other people that came before us, like Lester Young or somebody like that, and sing their part, you know. Don't play it, because on guitar, I don't know if you were familiar with guitar, but guitar, you get set fingerings, and you're really not improvising. You're playing the same fingers, you know, like, well, for instance, I say to you, know all your scales. Mm-hmm. This is the first time they come. They say, either they say no or yes. But if they say yes, I says, well, all right, play it. So they play it. I said, play it in the fifth position. They play in the fifth position, but they just move it up, you know, instead of playing G, they're up like the B flat key, but it's the same fingering. Mm-hmm. So I try to explain to them that they're playing their finger patterns, not that you can get away. Guitar is the fingerboard is art, you know, like to read.
So when you said that they're just moving their fingers up a few positions and then playing, that they don't know the notes that they're playing, is that what you're saying?
That's right. They got a finger pad. Oh, they know it's a third. They can hear it. Mm-hmm. But they don't know. So I say, now, if you're going to come to me, do you want to learn how to read? And when they say yes, then I say, well, then you have to know where everything is. And some of them are piano players and saxophone, violin, they can read music, but they can't find it on the guitar. See, so that's my little project, is to show them different ways of learning the guitar, doing it in their head, you know, that they can sing in their head. Anyway, what was I telling you?
We're talking about, how many students does your business have right
now? Varies. About, I guess most of the time it's around 18, something like that. I can't take, if I teach 3 hours or 4 hours a day, you see, I'm losing my voice now. Mm-hmm. I had to go to the doctor last year because I used to lose my voice so much I couldn't talk because I sing with them, you know. All that kind of thing.
Sure.
See, so I'm doing that all day, and he says, there's nothing wrong, like you've not got anything wrong like cancer or a throat, right. But you got weak, whatever this called, throat muscles.
Larynx?
Yeah, like they're weak. So that's why everybody recommends. I say hello, they say hello, Billy. Yeah. And I don't know them that well. You know?
Right.
See, so I got a very distinct sound, kind of it. Not that's good, you know, but it's different.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Well, you said an interesting thing just before, and that they ask you, well, how did you do it? And you say, well, don't do what I did. Well, let's talk about what you did.
All right, because, well, the reasoning I give them, they say, well, you know, like you say, listen to Lester or Charlie or one of them guys. They says, but that'd be imitating. I says, you can never imitate the same. Because so they says, what do you mean we could play? I says, you see that? Now what am I showing you?
Your thumb.
Yeah, and the fingerprint. And every one of us got a different fingerprint. See, so I tell them that. So don't be afraid. You ain't going to sound like,
Right.
you know, like
Even if you try, you're not
even
gonna,
if you
yeah,
try.
Yeah.
See, and one time when I was, well, you know, I did a lot of different kinds of things. Not the big, I was in big time, but I wrote a book, you know.
I know you did.
Oh, Sideman?
Sideman.
Well, that's what I probably was all my life. You know, I just, even if I was the lead, I was still, when I led the group, it was like, you know, if Clark Terry was there, he'd be the leader for that,
Yeah.
that night. Well, anyway, what was I saying?
Well, I wanted to talk about, you said an interesting
I
thing.
hope you have a lot of cuts.
Oh, we can cut and snip if we want. But you said an interesting thing about how some of the younger players come to you, and they make their own record dates and the whole thing. Would it have occurred to you when you were, let's say, 21, to go out and make your own record?
No, I didn't think of that at all.
But you,
See, but that's the way the world is today.
yeah,
But then again, when I come on think, there wasn't, in the beginning, I mean, a record date was like, I didn't even have a place, I had an old Victor home,
yes,
you know, so a
Right.
record, it was like,
Yeah.
in fact, I could go back so far that radio wasn't even
Well, I want to
so
actually.
long time.
Let's see, it all started in 1915 in November, right?
Yeah.
You were born in New York.
Yeah, I was born in the Bronx.
Uh-huh. And did you have a musical environment in your house?
Yeah, well, first, see when these questions are asked to me, I don't know, it seemed, now maybe it was just my, you know, my household or my family or but when we all got together for anything, like for dinner or a party we all sang. We all, you know, that was the entertainment. They started, down by the old mill stream, and you sing that. Down by the old mill stream. You see, and we all used to do that.
You were harmonizing.
Yeah, we didn't, I don't know.
Yeah, it was part of your life at that
Yeah,
time.
like, well, every corner had like a little quartet. They used to, I think they put a name like the Barber Shop Quartet.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody did that. And the only instrument we had at that time was one of these piano rolls. And they had the lyrics on them as they come down. So we'd all stand around the piano and sing. And my mother played a little piano.
Uh-huh.
And my father, well, I never seen him perform. I seen him do it in the house, and you know, but he was called Harry. His stage name supposedly was Harry Nelson. He says he sings, and then he'd come out, and he'd do the amateur hours and get the hook. If he got the hook, he'd get $4. If he just stayed in, he'd get $2. Because if you got the hook means that you're so rotten that everybody said, get him off, and the big hook would come out and grab you. So if they didn't have anybody, they'd pay you to be the hook, you know.
That's good.
Well,
So, was that considered vaudeville?
yeah, well, you mean my father, well, that was amateur night
Okay.
that I'm talking about
Yeah.
now. But it was vaudeville. There was nothing else but vaudeville. And the movies were silent movies.
How much did it cost to get into the movies when you were a
Oh,
kid?
gee, well, we used to call them a Nicolette.
Mhm.
So that was
you
just the movies.
Yeah.
But a vaudeville show was probably about 25 or 30 cents or something. I know, it's hard to believe. Well, whenever anybody says to me about, you know, these young fellas, they go out and they do these club dates, and I says, well, how? He says, you'll never get, you know, like you can't earn a living. I said, well, how much do you get when you do these weddings? He said, $150. I said, $150. And they got 2 or 3 over the weekend.
Yeah.
I said, that's quite a lot. They said, no, that ain't no good. You get with the big offices, you do good. You know, he says, they're jipping me. So I don't know what to say. So I tell them, I said, look, when I was young, what was a postal stamp? Not so far back, like 2 cents, right? Then it went up to 3 cents. Everybody went, wow. Now it's 32 cents. That's the difference with
Yeah.
your money.
That's right. What did your father do for a living?
He was a printer.
Uh-huh.
He was really a song and dance man, like I said, and he made, there was a audition. I wasn't born at this time, but he'd tell me that the audition was Ned Wayburn School Days. It got to be a big Broadway show.
Oh.
And they went up to Ossining, New York to break it in. And he made it as one of the guys in the cast, and not the star, but and as he went up to Ossining, which isn't far from the Bronx, and his father told him if he could quit because show business was out. You know, my grandfather, he thought that was bad. So he says, if you ain't got no place to get out on your own. So my father got afraid and come back, and my grandfather was a printer. He became a printer.
Yeah.
And he tried to do the same thing with me. You know, like because I was playing, I started when I was 9. I broke my leg, and my father bought me a ukulele
Oh.
while a girl pushed me around in a baby carriage. They didn't have no big things, you just got an old baby carriage. And I was laid up for a couple of months with this big cast. You know, you had a cast on your leg.
Yeah.
You mind me telling you all of
No,
this?
I want to hear this.
Oh, so to keep me busy, he gave me a ukulele. At that time, Harold Teen and Cliff Edwards, you know, Ukulele Ike. And they'd play 5 for 2, eyes of boot, coochie coochie,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And for some reason, I learned a couple of chords, and by the time my leg was better at the end of the summer, me and my cousin went on the summer school at two ukuleles. We practiced all day, and we got out there. I have this in my book, you know, like, and you mind me telling it again?
Please.
They pushed us. It was all racked. We got out there and we both froze. You know, we were never on a. I was never on the stage, and the damn stage was going. The people were going around. So I ran off the stage and I ran right into a little girl's dressing room. So they pushed me back on the stage. By the time I got back, my cousin was gone. He must have.
He went
So
the other-
I don't know what I did. I know I went time for 2. So they gave us ice cream. That was the end. But that's the first time I was ever in front of an audience, you know.
Yeah.
And from then on, then he got me a mandolin for a little while. I didn't like it. Isn't that I didn't like it. I didn't know what to do with it. And then he got me a banjo. And I still got the banjo.
It's still the same one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that he bought. It was about $100, so it was a Wayman banjo. It ain't a great banjo, but I used it all these years.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
$100 at that time was
It
significant.
was a lot of, yeah.
Yeah.
He thought because I could do these things.
But did it ever get to the point where all of a sudden your father was saying, now wait a minute, this music stuff is okay for fun?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, and then after he got me the banjo, then he got me a teacher in a candy store. The guy owned the candy store, and I'd go back there, and he'd show me. But he did do one thing. He made, well, I had 2 banjo teachers, and they at least tried to make you learn how to read music. You know, it wasn't like C or nothing like that. It was written out. You knew how to learn where everything. You know, you'd have all the, like Harry Reese's. He was a popular band leader. Calico Eskimos, I think they were called. Harry Reese
yes.
was like, he played like a violin player would play, you know, all banjo solos. So I had that environment, which I try to tell these kids that helped me out because at least I saw music in front of me, where some of them don't. They just see G7s and, you know, and then they come, well, now I'm coming to me. They come to me, they say, what's that called? What's that called? Oh, what's a flat 9? What's a plus? I said, wait a minute, flat 9 plus 9. I said, you know the old Italian guy? He comes in, he's sitting on his porch. He just got done playing with the grapes all day long. His hands are all cut and callous. And he sits on his porch. He has his bottle of wine there. And he drinks a couple of wines, and he picks up his guitar, and he goes, I meant some. If you can't do that, forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, make it that everybody's dancing.
Right.
Singing music, you know. You know what a music. No. Oh, the first question. You want me to ask you? You know what the first question is? I asked them after they get all through telling me they played with this rock group and that group. I says, "What? You want to learn how to read?" They say, "Yeah, that's why I came. I want you to. I heard that you make me read." You know. I says, "What's a note?" You don't want me to ask you.
What's a note?
Yeah, what's a note?
What's a note?
You don't know.
Well, it's a duration of sound.
Well, that's close, but they either say it's a pitch or something like that.
Yeah.
What it is set or regular vibrations, a musical note.
Mm-hmm.
See, if it isn't set, it isn't musical.
Uh-huh.
And that goes, and it has 4 elements. So I said, that's all I talk about. If you know, when you're talking and playing for me, I'm picking your weakest one. I'm showing you what your weakest at. So I said, what are they? They don't know. I said, what's a musical tone? I don't want to embarrass you.
What's a musical tone?
Yeah,
Okay.
a note represents a musical tone.
All right. Well, a tone has pitch.
That's one.
It has length.
That's called duration.
Duration. Yes. It has volume.
Dynamics.
Dynamics.
Very
Okay.
good.
And it has, oh boy, inflection.
Well, that's timbre. The sound.
Yes, the
that you
particular
create.
sound of that
Yeah,
instrument.
it could be 2 instruments.
Yeah.
Well, it could be the same instrument, and you got to get your sound to come out. That's
Right.
why, you know, like, well, if I take guitar player, you know, now I got a French guy, he come over from France, and he's a Django Reinhardt. He thinks the Django. I says, well, that's all right, but you're a traditionalist, so don't forget. I told you you're a traditionalist. I says, all the guys playing Dixieland, you know, they play Dixieland music. I said, I'm not a traditionalist. I don't care what you play. Whatever you want to play, you play, you know. But a traditionalist would be somebody who's staying like Dixieland or Django Reinhardt like 50 years ago. I says, but I seem to go from wherever I go, I seem to get in with other guys, and I guess I got some kind of a thing that I blend with them, so in some sort. I don't hurt their playing. Yeah, and that's a big deal. I try to tell them.
That's an important phrase right
Oh,
there.
well, sure.
I don't hurt their playing.
That's right. That's why they would have you. You know, like you might not play so good, but they play good. And I think Louis Armstrong, when I listened to Louis Armstrong, some of his early bands, I'd say, gee, why does he have a saxophone player? That guy, he don't play that good, you know. But now I realize that Louis could play good with these guys, you know, like they didn't, you get in with some good players, sometimes they sound good, but you feel them crowding you out. You can't,
Yeah. This is my date.
Yeah, well that's, well anyway.
Well, anyway,
that's-
you pursued the banjo for a while. How did you get into the guitar, and what time was that?
Well, now the banjo, I kept going because I had my own radio show, like, you didn't get paid for it, but it was WHN, like in Lower State Building. I was there for 6 months, all alone, no piano or anything was here. Just played these solos, you know.
Did you sing too?
No,
Just
no.
Just banjo solo. Wow.
Must have been terrible. I wish they would have taken some of it, you know. Well, anyway, from there, I got in with some bands, you know, like that. One was in the Pelham Heath Inn. I think that's where that's in the Bronx. And that was like well, it was like they had a girly show, and we had the violin player was the leader, and he played alto, C melody sax. And we had a tenor sax, 2 tenor saxes, a trumpet player, piano, drums, no bass, and me on banjo. But guitar was coming in, so I got a guitar and I couldn't hear the guitar. I mean, because there was no mics, don't forget, at this time. So I couldn't hear the guitar, so what I did, I went out and I bought I think they call it a it's got a metal plate in it. It was a national guitar. Dobra.
Oh, Dobro.
Yeah, that's it. But
Yeah.
I didn't know it. I thought it was a metal. But I could hear it a little better because it had this resonator in it, I guess it's called. So whenever I get like a tune that was in the C or G, I'd pick the guitar up, and eventually, little by little, the banjo was out and the guitar was in. See, I used the banjo because I used to go on, and in the floor show, I'd play Stars and Stripes Forever or something like that. But then the banjo went out, and I just started, I don't know, I got to know the guitar. I didn't take lessons right away on it, but I did have the advantage of reading music from the banjo, so I was
Yeah.
trying to find it on the guitar, you know, which some of these fellows don't have.
Can you recall what kind of money you were making on those first engagements with this band?
Well, it's a different areas. When I used to first when I went out, I was in days where everything was illegal. There was no liquor, so it was prohibition.
Yeah.
So everything I went with, even club dates, if they served liquor, it was illegal. So the girls we used to have a kitty, you know, and we'd have three pieces, like a drum, a banjo, and saxophone. That was it. And the girls would pass the band and say, "Hey, play Melancholy Baby. Give them a tip." So they draw. So one night I come home and I had $25 on my dresser. Oh, I didn't get paid $25. I got paid something like $3 or $4
Yeah.
a night. But if it was a good night with these girls and everybody was drinking, the more the girls got them drunk, the more they. So that night my father woke me up. He says, "Where'd you get that money?" Because he was only making about $45 a week.
Yeah.
You know? So I told him, I said, that we had a very good night. There was a couple of guys there, and they just kept on giving us tips. So that was my end. We made $75 in tips, you know, which was a good night. So anyway, but the average job was about $4 or $5. You know, that was a job. But when I had my own group, they picketed the place. The union was coming in Perillo. So the boss didn't want the picket lines around the place. So he says, "Join the union." So the guy come in who was the head picketer. I said, "What do we have to do to join the union?" The boss asked them. So he says, "They each have to give $25. And you got to come down to see if you read. But because you got a job, you don't have to go down. Give us the $25."
Yeah.
Well, they were trying to get you in, you know, and we were working. So,
All right.
so on that job, when it became illegal, I was the lead. I made $35, 7 nights a week, and no hours. You got there at 9 o'clock, but if there was people there at 3:30, you
Just kept playing.
yeah, and 7 nights too. So, and the guys made $25. See, and like I tell the guys, like, that's where I got most of my training, because when you sit like 6 and 7 hours a night, 7 days a week, and you just play, by the end of the night, man, you know, you get so relaxed through playing, because there was hardly any rest. You know, like you play, and then a girlie would go on and sing or dance or something, and then you'd play another for the dancing, and then another. So you had the instrument. So I said, "You poor guys, you don't have that advantage. And the only thing you can do is get around with each other's in the house,
Yeah.
or play with the records." I said, "But this was like a thing."
That was like school for you.
Oh, you can't buy that.
Wow.
You can't buy it. Even sitting in, that's what they're trying to do. You know, like sitting in, but it isn't as regular as that. You know, like and generally it winds up to be a lot of cutting. You know, this guy plays this, and the place I ran, I had my theme song was "No Sitting In," at the Sherwood Inn. Well, I ran it Friday and Saturday, and every night I had a different band. You know, like I had a different drummer, different bass player, and whatever the horn player was. Everybody came there, you know,
Yeah.
like Milt Hinton, Bobby Hackett, Clark Terry, all of them, Zoo,
Yeah.
Al, they all came. Lee Konitz came.
And this was where? At the Sherwood Inn?
Yeah, that was in New Hyde Park, right near where I live. I had everybody there.
Can I take you back just a few years? You were a teenager during the Depression? Did-
Well, I was just about, what year was the
Depression was
Mid-30s?
mid-30s?
38 or something like that?
I think the
I
stock market crash was...
don't think I was a teenager.
Okay,
I
you little-
remember my father, he went out selling apples
Mm,
for a nickel apiece.
yeah.
That's how he had to make enough because it got so bad. you know.
Did he lose his job during that time?
No, he didn't lose his. Now let me see how. I guess he did lose his job because that's all he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
See, he wound up to be the whole family was printers outside of me. So his father wanted him to be a printer, and he became a printer. But then his father was owner with his father's brother.
Mm-hmm.
He was an uncle, I guess, of mine.
Yeah.
But I didn't know him very much. But they were old time, and my grandfather couldn't get along with his brother, and they had a fight. So that means my father and him were out. So my grandfather, he didn't have no business then, and he went to work for a newspaper. I think it was the Bronx Home on North Side News, which eventually became, I think, the Bronx Home News. And don't forget, my father went to the ninth. I went to the ninth grade in elementary school. I quit. My father went to sixth grade, and he quit. My grandfather went to the first grade 1 year, and he quit and he went to work. And you know what? He wound up to be a proofreader in a newspaper.
Gosh.
Well, you know why? Because you learn on the job. Well, I tell these stories because that's what I try to tell them. That's what I did with music, you
Yeah.
know. See, because he said, you know, like What Makes Sammy Run, I think there was a story like that. You know, like he just worked around a newspaper and picked up all the trash, and all of a sudden, well, that's what my grandfather did, but you learn how to print because you see them set and type, and then you learn, you don't even know you were learning how to read and write. You know, well, that's the best way to learn.
That's a great story.
Well,
I had something about you playing with a fellow named Jerry Wald.
Jerry Wald, yeah, that was, he thought he was, after a while, when I first got with him, he was imitating Hal Kemp.
Oh.
The clarinets would be in megaphones with their hands through, and, you know, well, I forget how that kind of music. But then Artie Shaw retired, and Jerry got the big idea. So nearly overnight, he got all of his arrangements, and the whole band changed. But then it was supposed to be like Artie Shaw.
I see.
You know. Yeah, I worked with him in the Spanish Gardens in New York. Did a broadcast. You know, we were on the. I guess it was that every night they'd a Band of America or something. They'd jump like a half hour in this place, and then they'd be out in California. All the big bands get a shot at it every night. I did it with Abel Hyman too.
Yeah.
You know, you on the.
What age were you when you moved out of your family house?
Well, I worked since at 14 years old. I had my own radio show.
Yeah.
I was working in these speakeasies and things like that. Then a big out-of-town job came along, which was out in Far Rockaway. But it was for, you know, I had to live out. Is that what you mean? Where
Yes.
I moved out of the
Yes.
house. Yeah, so I went down to Rockaway, and I stayed down there for, almost a year.
Uh-huh.
You know, and from then on, when I did go home, I was always working. I'd just come in and say hello,
Right.
and then I was on the road with different bands. I was
Right.
very early. Like
Yeah.
I didn't even know that I was young. The guys who were working, they called me the big shot to kids.
Oh.
You know, a kid, he's a big shot.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. Evidently, I thought I was somebody.
Right. Can I assume that your father eventually came to terms with your life as a musician?
Well, he wanted me to get a real job. That's what he classed it as. So I said, yeah, I like what I'm doing. He says, yeah, but you got to get a real job. You're getting too old. I was about 18 or 17. He says, you got to get a job. He says, come on down to the shop with me. So he brought me all the way down to 11th Street, down in New York where we are. And it was in the summer, and that means I had to take a trolley car to the subway, and then I had to walk a couple of blocks to the thing on a hot summer's day, no air conditioning. He opened the door to get into this big shop. It was Vannery's Press. It was, by the way, he started off just picking up rags and everything. He wound up to be the foreman of this big print shop. It was, they made big books like Bibles and things like that. It was a Vannery's Press. He opened this door and the smell of ink hit me and I almost passed out. I said, Pop, I can't make it. I couldn't see myself going.
Yeah.
So then he kept after me. He said, geez, you got to get something. So one of my friends, who was the leader of one of the Club Day bands, he worked in Celanese. That's a silk, imitation silk, but it was just starting. So he says, they're hiring guys that, I know how old I was 16, and at that time, because NRA came in, and was it $16 you were allowed to make, or you had to make $16 a week. So I went in and to the Celanese, and after about 6 months, the boss called me in. He says, hey, I hear you're a musician. I said, yeah, I play banjo and guitar, but mostly band. He says, I'm a banjo player. He says, you do me a favor. You take your lunch hour, and then you come back and you come in my office while...
All right.
So I got talking to him, and he says, what the hell are you doing here anyway? I says, because my father wants to see why I don't work. So I'm going to hold a job for 6 months or a year to show him I could do it. So he says, yeah, but this job ain't nothing. He says, you see them guys pushing them things around, these rolls of silk and whatever. He says, they've been there for 10 years. He says, every year I give them $1 or $2 raise. He says, they're married. He says, so far in 6 months, he says, I had you and the receiving clerk, you're feeding the machines, double and fold machine. He says, I give you everything, opening the crates. He says, and you can do it. He said, they can't do it. And he said, I got to keep them on the same job. He says, yeah, you're too... So then he offered me a job in the underwear department because the underwear department was new in Celanese. The underwear department was like just starting. So the old guy who was the head of it, he got sick. So he says, would you get down there? And he says, we're going crazy. Every time this guy don't come in, nobody can get any orders because he's got like a 42 blue over there, and then he's got a 42 blue up there, and he's got it so mixed up that nobody can, it's all mixed up. He says, well, you get down there and condense the stock. I don't know what you mean, condense. He says, well, put all the blues together and the sizes together. It's okay. So I went down there, and it was only a little room. It was just like here, but it had. So I put everything in order, and I was sitting there. He come by, he says, what's the matter? Where are you? Why aren't you working? I said, well, what do you want me to do? He says, I told you, condense. I says, I did. So he comes in, and he looks at it, he says, hey, you want this job? He says, this job pays $35. And that was a lot of money because he was only making about 60, he told me at that time. He says, and it's going to be big, you'll have guys under you.
And
So
you were 16?
Yeah, 16 or 17.
Wow.
I says, no, I don't want this job. I says, as a matter of fact, I got to quit. I said, because I'm working every night in the Pelham East End besides this. I was trying to show my father that I would. So he says, you're working every night. He says, well, he says, don't quit now. He says, wait for 2 more weeks because the Christmas bonus is coming in, and they're going to give each guy 2 weeks' salary as a bonus because the company's doing so good. So I says, yeah, but I can't, I get so tired. He says, I'll tell you what you do. You come in, you check in, and you go in the back bin and go up there and sleep. And he says, if I need you, I'll call. And that's what he did for 2 weeks.
This guy was pretty cool.
Yeah, his name was Keys, Mr. Keys.
That was pretty nice of him.
Yeah, well, he was a brainy guy.
Yeah. Well, let me move up a few years to.
You'll never get through
I
that.
know my list. I'll never get through it. I wanted to talk
You know,
about.
I went on one of these interviews, but radio interviews. And oddly enough, it was a snowstorm, just like today.
Yeah.
But I'm there, and there's Phil Sharp.
Bill Shapp. Yeah.
Yeah, he's interviewing, and it was supposed to be for an hour. And we're talking and talking. All of a sudden, it's 3 hours, and my wife is out there. She come back. She says, "It's snowing." So I said, "Hey, Phil," I said, I better go. He says, "Yeah, well, right after this." And then you go on for, so it got so bad. He says, you only got a little while long, you know, and then we go on for another 10 minutes. So in the middle of the program, well, it wasn't in the middle, I said, "Phil, it's snowing outside. See you."
We're done.
So, and I went out on the radio in the car, I put the program on, and I was still on, but only my records. He was playing The Way You Looked. He had all the outtakes.
I see.
No, but my mouth, I can't stop talking.
I love it.
That's why
I
my
love it.
throat gets...
Tell me about the how Woody Herman came about.
Well, Woody was, well, I think that's in my book. I mean, really, how I got in with Woody.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think Flip must have recommended me because he's the only one that I knew when I joined them. But Woody rang up. And he says, "This is Woody." I says, "What are you?" Well, I wasn't, you know, I wasn't, I don't know. So he says, "Look, we're over in the Meadowbrook." He says, "And we're leaving tomorrow." He says, "Why don't you come over and sit in with us one set?" So I said, "Gee, I can't do that tonight, Woody." He says, "Why?" I said, "Because it's my kid's birthday, and I promised that I was going to be there." He says, "It's your kid's birthday." He repeated what I said.
Yeah.
He says, "Okay, I'll tell you what you do. You go down to Gold Farm," and he gave me Radio City, blah, blah, blah. And he says, "You go down there tomorrow and sign a contract and meet us in..." Now, Flip says it was Cincinnati. I thought it was Detroit. And I forget what the name of the place was. But Flip says it was... Well, either case, that's what I did. I went down there, and then I took a plane. They gave me money for a plane. I flew in and sat down. The interest, but the only one I knew, Davy Tuff joined the band with me at the same time, you know, and Flip, and I don't know who else, but I got to know them, you know. Well, I knew Flip, because me and Flip used to do a lot of things,
Yeah.
little things.
I think Flip
Yeah.
said he played with those, the Clico Eskimo.
The Clico Club.
How's that? What is that?
Clico Club
Clico
Eskimos.
Club Eskimos.
Yes, you know, it's a ginger ale or something.
Uh-huh.
Clico Club. That was the advertisement. Harry Reese, you mean?
Yeah.
You sure he said that?
I'm not, I think he did.
Well,
Or maybe it was Jerry Jerome, actually. I can't quite remember.
Flip played with Morgan. There was a Morgan he played with. And he played with Frankie Newton.
Uh-huh.
That was his big thing.
I see.
He was in Kelly's Stables, but he played clarinet at that time.
So Woody Herman was the first big band that you had
Well,
played with of that size?
Well, no, I was with Jerry Wall. I was
Yeah,
with Abe
okay.
Lyman. I was with Carl Hoff from the West Coast. He hired me. I mean, and at that time I had to go and brush up on my reading because Carl Hoff's band had the violin player was the arranger. There was only one violin, but he wrote double stops for the guitar and double stops for the violin, so it would sort of sound like that's the book when I come in. And they couldn't get any guitar player to read it.
Mm-hmm.
So I've come closer to it, but I went down to Eddie Bell and told him, geez, I better pick up on my reading. So Eddie Bell says, go to see Alan Russ. But Alan was sick and he was going to go out to California. So I just went over 2 times with Alan. He says, keep doing what you're doing, it's all right. No, but it's that lucky that I was taught how to read a little bit of kind of the banjo.
Yeah,
See,
right.
that's what I try to tell these guys. And this month, I think it's May, April, May. I think it's May, Just Jazz Guitar, there's a magazine called Just Jazz Guitar. They just sent me a proof of one of my solos that I recorded a long time ago. And I thought that was pretty crazy to copy it off the record, but now I realize they copied it off my music. But what they wanted to do, they put it in tabular.
Tablature.
And that's what I'm always against. So I'm not against it, but that's the guitar player reads that, and then you don't read the music.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like them boxers.
Yeah.
I say cement boxes. That's what you get. Oh, one of these, you know, that kind of thing. What do you play?
I'm a saxophone player.
Well, you see, I got a saxophone player now. It's odd about him. Well, not only him, I got a cellist. I got a girl who plays all the woodwinds, but she wants to get in jazz.
Yeah.
She calls it jazz, but what she really wants to do, she wants to go to, and I got a cellist.
Uh-huh.
Because he does these weddings in the churches or the synagogue, whatever. I don't know. But he wants to get in that he can do the dance part, and he realizes that he's got the wrong kind of, you know,
Yeah.
some dance, you know. Whoa. And so they come to me I get a little looser or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, Woody Herman was 1944. Did you have to join the service?
That was before I was with Abe Lyman.
Mm-hmm.
And Abe Lyman's band, we got in USO. And at that time, I don't know if the war was coming down, but Glenn Miller got shot, his band got shot up or something. And we were all in, I was a captain. I mean, you know, like a
Yeah.
captain's rating was. And they had us all, I had all my shots. And every day we'd play different embarkation camps around, you know, over the Jersey. They'd fly us up to New England, and we'd play a show, but we never knew if we were going with them or not. They wouldn't tell you. You know, you just said goodbye, and you didn't know it, and then the bus would bring you back, and the next day they'd say, we're going to meet here. And that's all because you couldn't talk, you know.
They never told you where you were going.
No, they never told you. You were ready to go overseas.
I see.
You were all ready to go because you know, like, and
What was the phrase? Loose lips sink ships, something like that. So they didn't want you to talk about where you were going.
yeah, that's right. That's right. So I said goodbye so many times I got tired. Then they screened all the people in my neighborhood. I didn't know this at the time, but the people started to tell my wife. They said because they were going to send me to South America. They found out jazz was like the German Navy and the Italian Navy and the French. If they were down around South America, they could. That was the what do you call it? A country not at war. So
Neutral.
neutral country. Mm-hmm. So they'd all go to. They found out they were very in going into hear jazz. So they shipped some jazz bands in these little nightclubs. So that I was pegged to go down there in case I was for an ear. They call it the U of the year. They sat me down, told me the job paid $100 a week. If you get killed, nobody knows anything about you. Your family gets nothing. They're telling me this is it. No, the army. You're not in the army. You're a spy.
Hey.
All you had to do was play, and if you were sitting with like, we'll say the Germans or the Italians or something, and they says, well, we won't see you for a while, you know. And then every week or so, you go to the embassy and say, well, this guy says he won't be around for a while. So they right away put it together that they're shipping out. Well, that kind of a thing.
They wanted you to like just
you
give
will-
them information about.
Yeah, but if you would, nobody knew anything about it. They didn't want to, because it was what kind of a country?
Neutral.
A neutral country. They didn't want to say that they were
Right.
behind it, you know. And then if in the USO, it was $100 a week too, but nothing else, you know. No. And if anybody, if you were in battle, you weren't shooting, but if you were on the battle, and your job, besides playing, was to pick up all the wounded or the dead.
Oh.
That was it. I mean, you had to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yikes.
I'm glad they didn't ship me home.
Oh. Chubby Jackson, Bill Harris, Flip Phillips. It was quite a crew in that band.
Oh, yeah. Well, everybody at that time thought it was one of the swingingest bands,
Mm-hmm.
especially for O-Phase.
Mm-hmm.
You know what O-Phase is?
Yes, I do. Says those white guys can really swing, huh? Yeah.
No, that's
Interesting.
what I had a lot of black players. They used to come in, you know, like they would take me down to Harlem and like where Mittens was, and then there was another place down there. All the guys used to sit in like Basie's band, not the band, but guys in the band, you
Right.
know. And they bring me down to Harlem, and they like me. I don't know. They just take me around. They protect me.
You helped them sound good.
I don't know. I don't know, but they were very nice to me, you know, like, and they'd show me, they tell me, so that's why I know about Ophé, is because in one of these places, this was about 4 in the morning, I'd get through at 3, and they'd meet me somewhere down around 125th Street, and we'd go around for a couple hours. But the bar, sometimes I was the only white guy there.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys were next to me. This one guy's name was Sunshine. I said, Sunshine, this guy's banging me in the back all the time. He says, let's change places. So he got over there. Nobody. so he says, listen to them. And they were talking. He said, hey, go on the rubber band, blah, blah, blah. He says, they're not talking about nothing. They're high-jiving. Don't you want to high-jive? You know, just talking. The rubber means automobile. You know, they had names
I
for
see.
each thing. So he was explaining what they were talking about. He said, they ain't talking about nothing.
And he said they were high jiving.
Yeah,
Yeah,
high-jiving.
high-jiving.
And he says, you know, like they say, that Ophé. He says, that means you.
What kind of fellas from the Basie band was it? Lester Young and or let's see, Buddy Tate, those fellas.
You mean playing in
Yeah.
these places?
The-
Well, I never seen the guitar player, Green,
Freddie Green.
Freddie
yeah.
Green. But I became, in the place, I mean, I didn't see him. Maybe he was playing there, but
Uh-huh.
I didn't notice it. But later on, we had Manny's, it's still there, I think, Manny. He's dead, but his son runs it. And they used to have a golf game every year, and they'd invite all the big musicians who either deal with the store or hang out, I don't know. So I was invited a couple of times. And the one time I was playing, and Freddie Green was there too. He didn't play, but he was just, we were in the golf game, you know, tournament or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And after, Manny would have all the instruments, not your instruments, he'd just have them there if you felt like picking it up. So I was playing, and then that's how Freddie Green started to talk to me. He told me, he says, if my son wants to take a lesson, I'm going to send him to you. He liked me. And well, the other part of that part, I'm not a great golfer. I'm not a golfer, you know. At that time, I just played for fun. And Clark Terry was on my foursome. So Clark's, and I knew Clark, you know, like, so Clark says, let's me and you have a bet. He says, I bet I beat you. So I said, well, I don't play. He says, I don't play. We ruined the foursome. The other two guys were mad. We were behind trees. So at the end, Manny's got a motion picture, you know, like I don't know, 16 millimeter or something, of the end of the game.
Uh-huh.
It was in the Engineers Club in what the hell was that? Glen Cove. Well, it's right in Long Island.
Glen Cove?
Well, I don't know if it's Glen Cove or what, but it was the Engineers Country Club.
Okay.
Manny would hire it out for one day a week, nobody else but musicians. From morning to night, we go there, they'd put us in the dressing room, they'd take our shoes and shine our shoes when we come back up. You know, it was ridiculous. And have breakfast. Then we go out at the ninth hole, you'd have hamburgers or hot dogs. At 4 or 5 o'clock, when you finished the 18, they had a cocktail party. After the cocktail party, we'd go in, get all dressed up, and go back into the dining room, and that's where all the instruments were set up. And we'd eat a meal the whole day.
Wow.
And so at the end of this thing, he's got. I don't know what I beat him by 1 star. It was terrible.
You had 120 and he had 119.
And he's got him flipping the quarter to me, and I catch him. So I met Clark
Nice
Terry.
moment.
Yeah, oh, he's a beautiful guy. I met him down at Flip's birthday party not so long ago. His 80th birthday.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, me and my wife got into this limousine to pick us up at the airport, and he come in. So I told him, I said, the only thing I can beat you is golf. I ought to call him up before we die and tell him to come on out and play golf.
Right.
He probably took lessons.
A rematch.
Yeah, he beat me.
Right. What was it like touring with Woody Herman? Was it mostly train, or did you have cars that you travel around the country?
No, we had bus and train. There was later on when we did some army bases again. They put us in one time they put us in a plane. You know, like these army bases, they were like giving them a free concert or whatever. They put us in a plane. The plane was stripped, nothing in it. A big, like it was like a
cargo plane or something.
Yeah, but nothing in it. No wind is in it. And they put the parachute on us and strapped us in. That was our seat. We just sat on the floor like that. And they take us, and you could fall off.
Wow.
Well, that was with Woody. And another time out in California, they took us into San Diego, and we had to play the show for these servicemen. But we couldn't live in San Diego because if you were a civilian, you'd get beat up. So they shipped us 20 miles out on one of these, coastal motels, put the band there and picked us up and bring us to the back door of the concert stage, and they'd line up all soldiers on each side of us to protect us. They were afraid if we lived in San Diego, we'd go out at night, and being that we didn't have any uniforms on, we'd get beat up.
Beat up by the servicemen?
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't appreciate civilians that. Yeah, San Diego was a big military. That's right.
Yeah. Like well, that was an odd one. But we play all of them, for the soldiers. It was good. That was with Woody. And I did that with Abe and too, Abe Lyman.
Tell me about the rhythm section with Chubby and you and Davy Tuff.
Yeah, and then we had a few piano players, but Ralph was the one that when I came there, he was the piano player. That was a crazy visit. I mean, it was, I guess a lot of it, his, you know, like the shouting and all, that was all Chubby Jackson.
Yeah.
You know, like, go ahead, you know that. And but the rhythm section, that Davy Tough, I mean, he just knew where to. He wasn't a flashy drummer, you know. As a matter of fact, I met Flip I guess it was his birthday, but he told me that the only solo that Davy ever took is on my tune, which was, I think, Skyscraper, that I recorded with Flip Phillips. Big hit.
Play something for you.
I mentioned. Does Davy Tough take a solo here?
I try
A
to.
4-bar solo. Flip doesn't take it.
I love that chord in there, by the way. That one little, like,
That little day.
it's pretty modern for the time.
How'd you get that? Oh, you knew I was coming, so
I knew you
you.
were coming. Actually, comes off this particular recording.
Did you interview him?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, I remember this record. Well, I don't know if I'm on all of them. I'm on.
You're on this recording, yes.
The
Yeah.
whole record?
A lot of it. A lot of
Oh,
it.
yeah?
Yeah.
I was sick. Yeah, one guy gave me one of these tunes, and I stayed on the same 2 notes to the whole
thing?
for the whole release or something. So he says, look what he did. He played a flat 9. He played,
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying.
he was analyzing.
He says, oh, yes, this was a very complex thinking process, right? And you were just like, ding, ding, ding.
I didn't know what else to do.
I love that stuff.
Well, you know, it's sort of thumpy, but at that time it's swinging.
It's swinging.
Yeah, yeah.
And Chubby's on this, too.
Oh, yeah. Chubby isn't on this one, is he? I don't know.
He's on some of the tunes.
Some of them,
This is
yeah.
like a kind of a collection of things, of Flips, but they're mostly from 40.
Did he say I wrote
40s.
that too with
Yep.
him?
Yep,
Yeah,
sure
because
does.
he called me up after he read the book. He says, you didn't put my name on. I said, look at the other page.
Oh. Check it out. What's up? That's wild. Did you write all that out? Was it kind of just-
I guess I did. I don't know. Football drum solo.
I don't know what happened to the
I
drums.
don't know whether, well, he says it's one of the tunes. That's the only 4-bar drum solo
Yeah.
Davey ever took.
Was there other recordings of that tune, probably?
I don't know who
Yeah.
would record that.
Well, we'd have to
I'm
research that.
surprised that flipped it.
Yeah.
Well, he was in on, we wrote a couple of, you know, we had a little sextet or whatever,
Yeah.
you know. It was a good time.
Wow.
We used to just meet, and I know we had a room in the hotel. I forget where the hell it was. I think it was with Abe Lyman.
Uh-huh.
I think I got him. Well, I know I got him on Abe Lyman's band. He was with Morgan. There's a guy, Russ Morgan. Was there a band by the name of Russ Morgan?
Doesn't ring a bell with
Well,
me.
But anyway, when Abe, I accounted the Army. Abe didn't want to take me out on the road for 10-week, you know, the bands used to stay in a hotel. That was the business. Now I realize, I didn't know it then. But they'd stay in a hotel like in Lincoln, which isn't there anymore. And you do about 10 weeks or 3 months in a hotel. And every night, or 2 nights a week, you'd be on this radio, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go out and do one-nighters and colleges and things like that.
Yeah.
So when he come back, he says, look at Bill, he says, for the 8 weeks or so, he says, I'm afraid to take it because I don't want to be stuck in the middle of this 8 weeks or something. He says, but when we come back, we open up in St. Regis. So he said, I'll give you a call. I said, okay. So I went and did my business, whatever I was doing. He gave me a call. He says, and I need a saxophone player, tenor. I says, why don't you get Flip? But Flip, he couldn't read very good at the time. I says, well, I told Abe, I says, he isn't a good reader, but he's got good ears. So, but I don't even know why I said that. I figure Flip, I never seen Flip really read. We used to do things like this by ear, you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he come there, and Abe liked him. So, you know, so he was in the UN with me too, with Abe,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Just, we were talking before the cameras were rolling about one thing with Chubby Jackson. Something about he actually took you down one day, and who was the other fellow you were talking about?
Oh, Sonny Berman.
Sonny Berman?
Yeah, well, we used to kid around. No, he had a lot of different things, and Chubby was always, he was, I guess he was an athlete, you know, like, he was a dancer. I know he always used to,
Yeah.
I don't know if he could really dance, but he was always strong, like, and he was big, you know, like at that time he was. Was he big now?
He's not big now.
No. Well, he was big. And we were kidding around or something, and Chubby says, shut up, I'll give it to you. So I don't know if Sonny said, yeah, what do you mean? And boom, he knocked him down. He didn't hit him, but he knocked him down and he pinned him down. And then he went over and grabbed him. I mean, Sonny looked at him.
Put you down too, huh? He is a spark plug, I'll give him that.
Oh, yeah. And he played that way, too. You know, like, he wasn't sophisticated with what pitches you're playing.
But he had the drive.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's what does it after a while. Well, Davy was, he was, like, it's hard to say because he wasn't a drummer that was a flashy drummer, you know, like or something. But he'd get into a certain place and he would just stay there. You couldn't get him away from that. And the band would eventually get with him, you know. Where Max, I say that in the book too, like Max, and when I played with, and then I used to sit behind down in 52nd Street. Charlie's band was out there, and then I was in the back with the other band that we split. So when I was in the back, you know, all the kids, when I was teaching in this conservatory, what's called a conservatory, was, and they always say, you gotta be cool, Daddy. I says, cool? Who's cool like you? They're like Max Roach is cool. I says, Max Roach is cool? I says, I sit behind the bandstand and boom, a broken stick comes by. I says, he only feels like he's cool, but he's putting energy in, you know, just fall apart, you know. It's the feeling.
Yeah.
So that's what Max would do. I'd hear him, and he said, and he'd push it up, and when he get it right where he wanted, then he'd stay there, and he'd play. You know, and he did that even when I was playing with groups like that, All-Star Dayton, and then we did that big broadcast, but it was one of them Battle of the Bands, you know. Well, I didn't think it was so good, but evidently it's still put out on the market. But Max was the same way there. He'd get it up to where he wanted it, you know, like in the beginning you think you can't grab it, but then all of a sudden it levels off. You know?
Felt like he was speeding up, kind of, or just
Yeah, but see, I hate to say speeding up because it wasn't speeding. It was just like a little anxiety, you know, like it wasn't where he wanted it, you know. See, and that's what, you know, that's what makes a good player or a good band. When a good player when he's in charge of it, if he's got the right guys, you know, not meaning they're great or anything, but he just puts it in where he wants it to be. That's part of the makeup. No matter what he plays, it's in that groove, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the hardest. Well, it isn't the hard part, it's easy. But if you're looking for it, you ain't gonna find it.
You played it for a while in a smaller group with Chubby and Lenny Tristano.
Yeah, well, that didn't last.
Didn't last too long.
No, well, see, Chubby is a different type of player. You know, he did that kind of playing. He's good. Lenny was, he was, I don't know if you want to say sophisticated or what, but we played a couple of jobs together. But really, Arnold Fishkin, Chubby was supposed to come in. I thought Chubby would be with Lenny and myself and Chubby, but because Chubby, I operated this thing, but he put Arnold Fishkin with us, the bass player. But a couple of dates, Chubby was angling around. One of them was on 52nd Street, and I was playing like I was playing with Lenny because Lenny didn't want me to play rhythm.
Oh,
He wanted me to do anything but don't play rhythm.
yeah.
Get with Chubby, and Chubby's go, come on! And because he was looking to get somewhere, and Lenny would be laying back. Oh, that was a miserable couple of nights. See, they just...
Definitely a clash.
Yeah, they're two different schools, you know. They just... Well, Lenny always used to have trouble most of the time with drummers because they'd fill in. They were used to sort of bebop, you know, fill it in. And he didn't want them because they'd destroy, he'd play, well, now I realize he'd be playing a lot of 3-beat or 5-beat phrases, and they'd put it in where they thought it should be. And so he'd generally tell them, just play time, man, you know, like, see, so, and Chubby was like that too at the bass. Well, that's, they didn't, not that they hated each other or anything, it was just that two people just, they're playing.
Right.
And,
I think I read something about you giving Lenny Tristano a driving lesson.
oh, yes. Oh,
Is that one of those?
I did do that.
Did you really?
Yeah.
And there was no accident at the end of it. So,
No, I think I told Bill Crow, I guess it was Bill Crow.
yeah, I think it was.
I says he wasn't a very good pupil. Well,
That's good.
well, because Lenny, you know, like we used to, we were pretty friendly, not in music as much as just two people, you know.
Yeah.
And I guess he had, I don't know, maybe he was that way with everything, but he talked about average things, you know, like we talked, like what would you really like to do, you know? I mean, if you really, what would you, he says, I'd like to drive the car.
Oh.
That's how that come up.
Uh-huh.
So I felt like, well, someday, 3 o'clock in the morning on a lonesome road,
Yeah.
I'll let you drive, and I did.
Neat.
Well, I like, you know, like all of them things. But I used to talk to him, we'd have a thing, he'd shut all the lights out in the room and, you know, like, to see if I could compete with him
Ah,
on his deal.
that's right.
You know? And then he beat me in, you know, these games in the bars with the little puck,
Oh, yeah.
bowling,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
He bowled and he bowled a strike. How did you do that? I know how he did it because he goes down, he measures the length of the board and the width of it, and, you know, he feels it.
Yeah.
And then he threw it. It happened to be-
Well, you've had, I think, a quite remarkable career in that you've moved from one kind of music to another with
Yeah, well,
great skill. And I guess you said it earlier in the interview that you you helped people. You didn't get in their way. You made them
That's,
sound better.
I don't know if I helped them. I didn't get in their way. That was the big thing. You know, like, I guess they could play.
They could.
But I didn't think of it like that until, you know, now when you get a little older, you hear things like you just was playing. I wasn't up to them guys. Well, to me, I didn't have the knowledge that a lot of them, not Flip so much, but Flip's got knowledge about playing, but But I mean, some of the other guys like Ralph Burns, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, I worked with Nelson Riddle. I didn't realize that he was.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I don't know. Neil Hefti was another. Shorty
Right.
Rogers.
Sure.
You know, like Shorty Rogers on Pam. Him and Ralph Burns put the ending on it.
With in the Metronome All Stars with Diz and Miles and
You know,
Charlie Parker.
Well, Charlie was sort of nice to me. Miles was funny with me. Dizzy was all right with me. I mean, he you know, talked to me and
Yeah. Yeah.
and Charlie was very good too. I mean, he just if we were walking, I'd be in another place, you know, across the street in 52nd Street, and he used to walk around with his horn and just sit in every night. He'd
Yeah.
walk around in the summertime. He'd walk in and play a couple of courses and walk out and go to the next place. So he heard me playing all the time, you know.
Yeah.
So I was very surprised. I don't know, I told you, and I said this before, but when me and Serge was coming home from one of them All-Star dates, and we're in the car, and we're just talking like, and Serge said something like, "Do you realize that we were on the All-Star date, like the biggest thing in the country, like you know, like Dizzy and Charlie and blah blah blah." So I said, "Yeah, well, that's because, you know, like you just happened to do it." He says, "Well, what would make you happier than that?" I says, "If Charlie called me up for his record days." And within a couple of weeks, I'm sitting there and who do you, hello, BB. He said, "Yeah, this is the Bird." See, so.
There you go.
That's right. Didn't do so good, but he did it, you know.
Can you think of when one of the hardest recordings you ever participated in? Would it have been some of the more modern stuff, or don't you even look at it that way?
When I got, you mean when I got tied up inside? Well, there was a couple of times with Stravinsky, forget about it.
Tell me about that, will you?
Is it
The
Stravinsky or Stokowski?
It's-
Stokowski. The
You mean
conductor.
The Stokowski, yes.
Yeah, in NBC.
Oh, yeah, at NBC.
But the other one was the other one.
Stravinsky wrote the piece for
Yeah, well,
Woody Herman.
but he just come back and he got us together in maybe a half hour.
Uh-huh.
We were trying to play it, we couldn't, because it wasn't just the rhythms. Everybody had different little things, you know.
Yeah.
But he come in and he clapped his hand like this, and we all got with him. He says, you know, he says, "I wish the classical guys would, so you tell them what to do and they do."
Yeah.
No, but I was going to tell you something.
Stokowski.
Oh, one of my hardest things, well, this wasn't in the book, so I could tell you, like, it was a band with strings and everything, commercial days, but with strings and everything. It was very fast. And the guitar had to play all after beats, like,
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah, boom
that.
chick, boom chick. Yeah.
And then, in the middle of it, it got mixed up. It was long, like about 4 or 5 minutes, and they had the guitar piped up. No piano, just bass and drums, and this guitar had to give that afterbeat. That's a hard job.
Uh-huh.
I mean, very fast, too. You know, and he'd stop, he'd say, you know, you can't, if we got you, you're very important. I said, "I know." I finally got it. He said, "That's all right."
To take.
No, that's a hard, you know, like it wasn't a ridiculous thing to do, but just the,
If you got off once, all of a sudden you're on the downbeats instead of the
yeah,
ups.
like, oh. Well, that happened down in the village with Jack Briella's Alive and Dead, or Dead and Alive, whatever.
Oh, yes.
It was a play.
Alive and Well and
Yeah, something
yes,
like that.
Shock.
They had a little quartet
Uh-huh.
down there. And Wainwright, I just sent me in as a sub and I got along all right but there was 7/8 time and things like that, you know. And there was the keyboard player didn't play piano. He played all kinds of, I don't know what the hell he played. The drummer was never just rhythm, just me and the bass. I think Teddy Kotek was the bass player. So there's one 7/8 time. I had the afterbeat sing, and it was one zing, one zing, one zing, zing, one zing, one zing, boom, dang, dang. So it was all right the first show. Then we had a little time off, like the matinee, and come back for the night. In the meantime, we'd go out and have a couple of drinks.
Uh-oh.
It was funny. You know, like little things like that, you figure that you get all messed up with a big bunch of things. There's little things like this, they're so, well, simplicity, it's hard to be simple.
Yeah, it's hard to be simple in 7/8.
No, that's what I tell the guys. I said, you know, you're always looking all over the place, and really it's right next to you, like the upper and lower neighborhood. You know?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're looking all over, and it's right next to you.
Uh-huh.
You know, like if you played a D flat 7 to a C to make it, you know,
Right.
it's a substitution. But if they did not, they'd be looking all over.
Right. Did we just run out of a tape?
You must have.
I must have. Okay.
It's quarter to.
Yeah, we'll wrap up here. Who do you listen to these days? You listen to any particular younger players, or you listen to?
I listen to the you see, the way I do it, I tell them, they come in for me as a teacher. I says, I'm not a teacher. I'm an instructor. You're the teacher. If you can't teach yourself, you know, I tell you to do this, you keep doing this. And if you can't do it, then you can't teach yourself.
Uh-huh.
So if you don't like me, then don't come to me. But this is, you go on your own. So what was the question?
Talking about listening, if you have any favorites that you listen to now.
No, what I do, I generally let them hear, like I say, like they sing. Sometimes I put So What on. Mainly I put that on, not, well, it's a good record, but, and it mainly is that if I'm showing them the Dorian mode, say, it's a good example because all they have to do is play in one key and then go up a half a tone higher and back. So I get them that they start to hear that, you know, like that's all. And then I analyze some of the see, and I show them that that's only a couple of notes in the scale, you know. So if he can do it, you got to do it. You know, like where you're running all over.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I like sort of. Anyway, what were we talking about again? Oh, showing them how simple and why scales are important. You know, like if I say that's the Dorian mode, oh man, the whole record, they hardly play anything but the Dorian mode. You know, like when you analyze it, yeah, a couple of times they play a little out of the way, you know.
But they come back in.
Yeah. Like, say, see, so what do you know, when you argue with me, why do I have to know my scales? That's why.
Well,
you know?
yeah.
And I can talk to you. It says, you know, like I explain that when they argue with me, you don't know it. I says, I know you don't have to know it. I says, but you're looking at a guy who happens to have everything else. I says, you're like Tall Follow. You don't practice scales. It's true. I says, but you whistle a scale and he'll blow it right with you. I says, that's the difference. You can't do that. You know?
Well, it sounds like your students are fortunate to be working with you. I would say that.
I got some guys hanging around me for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, they don't come every week, but they take a year off and then they bring up, I need a little brush up.
Right. Well, this has really been a pleasure for me to talk to you, and I appreciate.
I hope you think so when you say.
I hope so too.
Maybe this will be it. Just, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
I hope it's not snowing. You know?
Like we started.
You know, of all the days that it snowed, it didn't snow. I don't think it snowed the whole winter.
Right. Just our luck.
a blizzard.
Right. Well, thanks for your time. I
Okay.
hope you have a safe trip back, and you've had a marvelous career, and I appreciate you sharing it with me today.
I'm glad. I mean, I have no, like if you ask me what would I do, I don't think I'd do anything different. I enjoyed it. Most of the time I enjoyed it. I wasn't, begrudging anybody. I wasn't mad at somebody because they did it better. I mean, I don't look at life that way.
Right.
This is the way I did it, and that's why I'm telling you to write a book. Tim, the guy who's taking all these pictures, he should write a book. Everybody, what else is there to do?
Okay.
So 100 years from now, somebody, if they're fortunate, they'll be able to see.
They'll be able to see it. All right.
Well, bye-bye.
Thanks for your time.